So let's introduce session management and cookie parsing from Node.js. We're going to be using these two new libraries. One is cookie parser, and the other is express session to be able to manage session on the server. So cookie parser is a library that allows Node.js to be able to parse that cookie from the headers. Right out of the box. Express doesn't know how to parse it, just like it doesn't know how to parse the body, JSON from a body, and we had to add body parser to be able to extract JSON from the body, right? Same thing. The reason we needed body parser is that the body could contain all sorts of things, right? It could contain documents, PDF, form submissions, images. It could contain all sorts of things. In specific, we wanted to be able to exchange JSON back and forth, yes? That's why we added body parser so that we can explicitly extract JSON from the body and parse it into a JSON object. Well, same thing cookie. Cookie are specific headers. There could be any number of headers, right? There are hundreds of types of headers. We are in particular care about the cookie header, right? We'd like to be able to really quickly just parse it and make it available through an API. Then on top of that, we're going to have another library, the Express Session library, that is going to be built on top of the cookie library, right? That uses the cookie library to be able to keep track of an object based on a cookie, right? So that when you say store this or store that, it's going to use the cookie to be able to key, right, what objects are being stored for you in this in RAM, right? So if I access it with one cookie, I'll have access to some objects. But if you access it to the same server, you'll have a different cookie. You'll be looking at different objects. Make sense? I don't want my shopping cart to be mixed up with your shopping cart, right? Each one of us has a different shopping cart in RAM, and the way it distinguishes it is because they're both keyed off of different cookies. Make sense? All right. So let's install both of these. It might already have been installed. I don't know. Let me check. If we look at the package JSON, doesn't look like we have installed it. Okay, they're not there. So let's install those two libraries, cookie parser. So it'll be npm install cookie parser -- save. So there it is. So it adds that, and then now we're going to do express session. Okay, and you can take a look at the library for Express Session, and it shows how to use it. Okay, and here's documentation. I recommend that you take a look at it. Right. So here's a couple of examples on how to use it. Get session. Right. So I don't know. I thought I had an example on setting it up. Let's grab an example. I don't know if I documented it here. In here, let's see. Okay, there it is. So here it is how to configure it. So we're going to configure it. By first configuring the cookie parser and also the session. Right, so first let's turn on the cookie parser. And we're going to do that in the server. In the server, we're going to load those two libraries. Let's load those two libraries that we just installed. There they are. We're going to configure them. First, we're going to create an instance of the cookie parser and tell Express to use in every request, every time it intercepts a request, to look for the cookie header, right? And parse it out and make it available for us to retrieve the cookies that come from in the request from the client. We're also going to tell the session. We're also going to create an instance of the session object. And we're going to ask it that we want to encrypt the session, meaning any objects that we store in the session, right? We want the cookie, whatever data we ever put inside of that cookie, we want to make sure that whenever it goes out to the client, right, that the data that is being stored in the cookie, that is going to be encrypted, right? If it has any identifiable information like user IDs or any username or any data that we're ever going to put on the cookie, we want to make sure that when it leaves the server, right, and on its way to the client, that it's encrypted, right? So that even if somebody opens up the browser and opens it and sees the cookie, that they will find just gibberish. Okay, you can certainly look at the cookies that are stored in your local browser. Okay, also the sessions by default they're configured to time out, meaning that these cookies by default you can set how how long will a cookie will be valid for, right? You can say that this particular cookie is valid for a day, or is valid for a month, or is valid forever, right? So that you can take that same cookie, and the server can remember that it's the same cookie that I used a week ago, and as far as it's concerned, if it's configured correctly, that cookie is still valid. Your session is still valid. Yeah, you don't need to re-identify. It's still you. I believe that it's still you. And Facebook and Google do this all the time, right? They leave their sessions valid for a long time, so that whenever you come in next, it knows that it's still you, right? To be a little more secure, typically we set the default timeout for a cookie to be no more than 30 minutes, right? Meaning that if we don't see any activity from a user, interacting back and forth, sending cookies over back and forth between the client and the server, if it hasn't been any activity in the last 30 minutes, right, we will consider that cookie invalid. Right, so that any data that was stored for you, any shopping cart that would be stored for you, if you had no activity for more than 30 minutes, I won't remember that shopping cart. Right? Obviously, some retails find other mechanisms to keep track of session. Right? For instance, Amazon keeps track of your shopping carts forever. So they use other mechanisms. Right? Instead of keeping track of this in RAM, what they'll probably do is they store it in a database, right? And so that it has a much longer term lifespan. So it's not necessarily in the RAM of the server, but stored in the database. Okay, so that even if the particular cookie times out, right, next time you log in, right, we'll remember that these were the shopping cart that you were keeping track of, right? So they do a hybrid. They do a hybrid server-side session, but also a database-side session mechanism. Okay, so the session create session. Where is it? Where are you? Create. So that now, if we go, let me clear this out first. Let's not do this just yet. So if we restart and hit our local and look at the network. All localhost in the headers. So these are response, right? So we have accept ranges, cache control, connection, content type, and whatnot. Request. So these are the things that are going from the client over to the server. So that if we now uncomment this and restart the server. Notice that a new header was sent over from the server. See, this is a new header that is asking the servers is asking the browser to listen and set this cookie on the client. So the browser is gonna now remember for localhost that it will have this cookie. Notice that it's gibberish, right? It's been encrypted. Whatever information was being sent is being encrypted, and next time around, see that this was the next query. Notice that it's sending over that cookie that was set earlier, right? That cookie wasn't there earlier, right? Is now in the request, right? It's the browser is sending the same cookie that the server asked it to remember next. Okay, and notice at this time the server did not ask to set the cookie, right? Because it said, "Oh, you sent me the cookie that I sent you. I recognize it. We're still in the same session. It's still you." Right? I'm not asking you to set it. If we wait for another 30 minutes, that cookie will expire. The browser will send the cookie, but the server is going to reject it. We're going to say, no, that cookie is no longer good. Here's a brand new cookie. Use this one next, right? And now it'll choose that cookie next time around. Okay? Does that make sense? Right. So on top of this, we're going to build our security mechanism, right? We're going to be using Passport.js that uses the session information to be able to remember things such as, you logged in already. I know who you are. Okay, so next time around, I will remember for the next 30 minutes that you have already logged in. Okay, that I know who you are, and I'll let you go from one place to the next without challenging you again to log in. Imagine it would be very inconvenient that as we navigate from one page to the next, every single page would ask us to log in again. It would be very, very inconvenient. Yes? What we want to do is have the server challenge us once, but once it identifies who we are, it remembers, at least for the next 30 minutes, that it's still us, and it won't challenge us as we go from one page to the next. Okay? All right, so let's do that next.